The first scream came before the neighbors even realized what was happening. "Stop! Just stop, please!" The voice was loud, desperate, and filled with fear. It cut through the quiet Texas night like a blade. Then something slammed against the wall. Inside the modest suburban house, chaos had already erupted. Michael Harper, a Marine Corps veteran who had survived years of military service, stumbled backward into the living room, breathing heavily. Across from him stood his wife, Chief Petty Officer Rachel Harper of the United States Navy. Her chest rose and fell as anger burned across her face. "This is your fault," she shouted. Michael raised his hand slightly, trying to calm the storm building in front of him. "Rachel, listen to yourself. This isn't you." But Rachel's eyes looked different tonight. Colder, harsher, like something inside her had snapped. Outside, the Texas neighborhood remained quiet. Porch lights glowed softly. A dog barked somewhere down the street. No one yet knew that inside the Harper home, a marriage that once represented loyalty and honor was collapsing in the most violent way imaginable. Michael spoke again, his voice strained. "Rachel, we can talk about this tomorrow. Just calm down." Rachel laughed. It wasn't the warm laugh Michael had fallen in love with years ago. This one sounded sharp, almost dangerous. "Tomorrow?" she said. "You think tomorrow is going to fix this?" Michael's stomach tightened. He knew this argument had been building for weeks. But tonight, something felt different. Something far worse. And within minutes, the situation would spiral completely out of control. But to understand how two respected military service members ended up in this moment, everything had to go back to the beginning. Rachel Harper had spent nearly 2 decades in the United States Navy. She wasn't just another sailor. She was a Chief Petty Officer. In the Navy, that title meant something. Chiefs were leaders, mentors, the backbone of the entire enlisted force. Rachel had earned that respect the hard way. Long deployments, endless training, years of sacrifice. Those who worked with her often described her as disciplined and focused. "She's tough," one sailor once said during a command gathering. "But that's why people respect her." Rachel didn't mind that reputation. She had always believed strength was necessary. Weakness, in her world, got people hurt. But behind the uniform, Rachel was also a wife. And her husband Michael understood the military life just as well as she did. Before Rachel had reached the rank of chief, Michael had already served his own time in uniform. He was a Marine Corps veteran, the kind of Marine who carried himself with quiet confidence. Michael didn't brag about his service. He rarely even talked about it. But those who knew him understood that the Marine Corps had shaped him in ways that never truly left. Years earlier, when Rachel and Michael first met, their shared military backgrounds created an instant connection. They understood things that civilians often didn't. Long deployments, missed holidays, the strange emotional distance that sometimes came with military life. Their relationship moved quickly. Within a year, they were married. Friends described them as the perfect military couple. At gatherings, Michael would joke while Rachel rolled her eyes. "She runs the Navy," Michael once teased during a barbecue with friends. Rachel smirked. "Someone has to keep the chaos under control." Everyone laughed. But beneath the humor was genuine respect. They admired each other's service. They admired each other's discipline. For years, their marriage appeared strong, even when Michael transitioned out of the Marine Corps and began adjusting to civilian life in Texas. Rachel supported him. "You'll figure it out," she told him one evening as they sat at their kitchen table. Michael sighed. "Civilian jobs don't work like the military. Everything feels different." Rachel reached across the table and squeezed his hand. You handled the Marines. You can handle this. And for a long time, things seemed stable. Michael found work. Rachel continued advancing in her Navy career. Their home became a quiet refuge away from the pressures of military life. But over time, subtle cracks began forming. And at first, neither of them wanted to acknowledge them. Rachel's responsibilities in the Navy increased dramatically after she became a chief. The pressure was intense. Younger sailors depended on her leadership. Command expectations grew higher. Long hours became normal. Michael noticed the change. One night, he watched Rachel pacing the living room after returning from a particularly stressful week. "You're still working," he said softly. Rachel didn't look up from her phone. "I have to finish this report." "You've been at it for hours." Rachel's voice snapped back immediately. "Michael, this isn't optional." Michael leaned against the doorway. "I know that. I'm just saying you don't have to carry everything alone." Rachel finally looked up. "I'm a chief now. That means people depend on me." Michael nodded slowly. "I depend on you too." Rachel didn't answer. Instead, she returned her focus to the screen. Moments like that began happening more often. Small disagreements, sharp responses, long silences. Michael started feeling like the woman he married was slowly drifting away. And Rachel felt like no one truly understood the pressure she carried every day. The tension between them continued building, but neither of them realized just how close they were to the breaking point. And when that breaking point finally arrived, it would shatter everything they had built together. Before the story continues, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Untold Mystery Stories shares real cases that reveal the hidden truths behind shocking events. And this story is far from over, because what happened next inside the Harper home would leave an entire Texas community stunned. The tension inside the Harper home didn't explode overnight. It crept in slowly, quietly, like pressure building inside a sealed container. At first it was small disagreements, then sharp words, then long stretches of silence that felt heavier than any argument. Michael noticed it most during the evenings. Rachel would come home from work exhausted, her expression tight, her shoulders tense. Some nights she barely spoke. Other nights, the smallest comment could ignite a fight. One evening, Michael placed 2 plates on the table and called from the kitchen. "Dinner's ready." Rachel walked in, dropped her bag on a chair, and sat down. She stared at the food for a moment. "What is this?" Michael frowned slightly. "Chicken and rice. You like it?" Rachel sighed, rubbing her temples. "I just worked 14 hours, Michael." "And I cooked," he replied calmly. Rachel pushed the plate slightly away. "I'm not hungry." Michael stared at her. "You haven't eaten all day." "I said I'm not hungry." Her voice carried an edge that hadn't been there before. Michael leaned back in his chair. "Rachel, what's really going on?" Rachel looked up quickly. "Nothing." "That's not true." Rachel's jaw tightened. "You think you understand the pressure I deal with every day?" Michael didn't raise his voice. "I'm not trying to compete with your stress." Rachel scoffed. "You wouldn't last a week in my position." Michael blinked. "That's funny. I lasted years in the Marines." Rachel stood up suddenly, her chair scraping loudly across the floor. "This isn't the Marines." Michael raised his hand slightly. Okay, calm down." Rachel walked out of the kitchen without another word. Michael sat there staring at the untouched dinner plates. Something had changed in their marriage, and neither of them knew how to fix it. Over the following weeks, the arguments became more intense. Rachel's temper seemed shorter, Michael's patience thinner. Friends started noticing the difference too. At a small neighborhood gathering, Michael stood near the grill talking with a neighbor when Rachel approached. "Michael," she said sharply. He turned. "What's up?" Rachel leaned closer. "You were supposed to take care of the yard today." Michael frowned. "I did. The back fence is still a mess. I said I'd fix it tomorrow." Rachel crossed her arms. "You always say tomorrow." Michael lowered his voice. "Can we not do this right now?" Rachel's eyes narrowed. "You mean in front of your friends?" Michael exhaled slowly. "Yes." Rachel turned and walked away. The neighbor beside Michael raised an eyebrow. "Everything all right?" Michael forced a smile. "Yeah, just one of those days." But deep down, Michael knew the truth. It wasn't just one of those days anymore. The tension inside the Harper home had become constant, and it was beginning to wear them both down. One night, after another heated argument, Michael sat alone in the living room. Rachel walked in from the hallway. "You're still awake?" Michael nodded. "Yeah." Rachel folded her arms. "You're avoiding me?" Michael looked up. "No. I'm trying to keep things from getting worse." Rachel's eyes flashed. "Oh, so now everything is my fault?" Michael rubbed his face. "That's not what I said." Rachel stepped closer. "You think I don't see the way you look at me now?" Michael frowned. "What are you talking about?" Rachel pointed at him. "Like I'm the problem." Michael stood slowly. "Rachel, we're both under pressure." Rachel shook her head. "No, you just don't respect what I do." Michael's voice grew firmer. "That's not fair." Rachel laughed bitterly. "Fair?" Her voice rose. "You want to talk about fair?" Michael stepped closer. "I'm trying to talk to you." Rachel suddenly slammed her hand against the table. The loud crack echoed through the room. Michael froze. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Rachel's breathing was heavy. Michael stared at her carefully. "Rachel." She looked at him, her expression hard. "What?" Michael spoke quietly. "You're scaring me." Rachel blinked. Just for a moment, the anger on her face softened. But then, she turned away. "Go to bed, Michael." He didn't move. "Rachel, we need help." Rachel spun around again. "What did you just say?" "Counseling, something. This isn't healthy." Rachel stared at him like he had insulted her. "You think I need therapy?" Michael shook his head. "I think we both need help." Rachel's voice dropped to a cold whisper. "You think I'm weak?" Michael's eyes widened. "No, that's not what I said." Rachel stepped closer. "That's exactly what you meant." Michael tried to keep his voice steady. "You're twisting my words." Rachel's fists clenched. "You have no idea what I deal with every day." Michael nodded. "You're right. I don't." Rachel glared at him. "Exactly." For several seconds they stood there in silence. Then Rachel turned and walked down the hallway. The bedroom door slammed shut. Michael remained standing in the living room. The sound of that door echoed in his mind, and something told him that their marriage had reached a dangerous point. But he still believed things could improve. He still believed the woman he loved was somewhere behind all that anger. What Michael didn't realize was that the situation was already spiraling towards something much darker. Because while he was trying to save the marriage, Rachel felt like everything in her life was falling apart. The pressure at work, the arguments at home, the constant feeling that no one understood what she carried on her shoulders. And that pressure was building toward an explosion, one that no one in that quiet Texas neighborhood would ever forget. Before the story continues, take a second to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps more people discover untold mystery stories. And the truth about what happened inside the Harper home is about to take a terrifying turn. Because the night that destroyed this family was only days away. The night everything collapsed began like any other evening. The sun had already disappeared behind the quiet Texas neighborhood. Streetlights glowed softly. Cars sat quietly in driveways. Inside the Harper home, Michael stood in the kitchen pouring a glass of water when he heard the front door open. Rachel stepped inside. Her movements were sharp and tense. She dropped her bag onto the couch harder than usual. Michael looked over. "You're late." Rachel didn't respond. She walked straight to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, stared inside for a moment, then shut it again. Michael watched her carefully. "Long day?" Rachel rubbed her forehead. "You have no idea." Michael leaned against the counter. "Try me." Rachel exhaled heavily. The command meeting was a disaster. Everyone's pointing fingers. Everyone wants answers. Michael nodded slowly. "That sounds rough." Rachel shook her head. "You always say that like it fixes something." Michael frowned. "I'm just listening." Rachel looked at him with tired eyes. "No. You're pretending to understand." Michael's voice stayed calm. "I'm trying to support you." Rachel suddenly laughed bitterly. "Support me?" Michael's expression tightened. "Rachel," but she was already pacing. "You sit here all day while I deal with chaos." Michael's tone sharpened slightly. "That's not fair." Rachel stopped walking. "Oh, really?" Michael spoke slowly. "I work too." Rachel pointed toward him. "Not like I do." Michael felt frustration rising. "So this is what we're doing now? Comparing who works harder?" Rachel's voice rose. "You wouldn't survive my job." Michael stepped forward. "And you wouldn't survive mine either." The room fell silent. Rachel stared at him. Michael realized his voice had gotten louder than he intended. He exhaled slowly. "Look, I didn't mean that." Rachel's expression hardened again. "You meant it." Michael shook his head. "No, I meant we're both under pressure." Rachel crossed her arms. "You don't respect me anymore." Michael blinked in disbelief. "Where is this coming from?" Rachel's voice trembled with anger. "I can see it in your face every time we argue." Michael rubbed his temples. "This isn't about respect." Rachel stepped closer. "Then what is it about?" Michael paused. Then he said something he had been holding in for weeks. "It's about how you've changed." Rachel's eyes narrowed. "Changed?" Michael nodded slowly. "You're angry all the time." Rachel scoffed. "So now I'm the problem." Michael sighed. "I didn't say that." Rachel's voice rose again. "You're saying I'm broken." Michael shook his head quickly. "No!" Rachel slammed her hand against the counter. "You think I can't hear it in your voice?" Michael stepped back slightly. "Rachel, calm down." Rachel stared at him with burning eyes. "Don't tell me to calm down." Michael raised both hands. "All right, fine." Rachel paced across the kitchen again. Her breathing was fast now. "You have no idea how much pressure I might deal with every day." Michael said quietly. "Then talk to me about it." Rachel stopped. For a moment it looked like she might. But then her expression hardened again. "Talking won't fix anything." Michael took a step closer. "It might?" Rachel shook her head. "No, because you already decided what you think about me." Michael's voice grew frustrated. "That's not true." Rachel suddenly pointed toward the hallway. "Maybe we should just end this." Michael froze. "What?" Rachel repeated it. "Maybe we should just end this." Michael stared at her. You're talking about divorce? Rachel didn't answer immediately, but the silence was enough. Michael felt something heavy drop in his chest. Rachel, don't say things you don't mean. Rachel's voice came out cold. I mean it. Michael ran a hand through his hair. This is insane. Rachel glared at him. You think I'm joking? Michael tried to steady his voice. No, I think you're angry. Rachel stepped closer again. And what if I'm done? Michael shook his head. You're not done. Rachel leaned closer. How do you know? Michael looked straight at her. Because we're better than this. Rachel laughed quietly. No, Michael, we're not. Michael opened his mouth to respond, but Rachel suddenly moved past him toward the living room. Michael followed. Rachel, we're not making decisions tonight. Rachel turned around sharply. You don't get to decide that. Michael's patience snapped. Then what do you want from me? Rachel shouted back. I want you to stop acting like you're the victim. Michael stared at her. I never said I was. Rachel pointed at him again. You look at me like I'm the enemy. Michael shook his head. I look at you like my wife. Rachel's breathing grew heavier. And what if I don't want to be your wife anymore? The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Michael felt his chest tighten. Rachel. But she was already walking toward the door. Where are you going? He asked. Rachel grabbed her keys. I need air. Michael stepped toward her. Running away won't solve anything. Rachel spun around. Neither will staying here. For a moment it looked like the argument might finally end. But instead, it exploded. Rachel shoved past Michael. Michael grabbed her arm. Wait! Rachel jerked away. Don't touch me! Michael stepped back immediately. All right, fine. But the damage had already been done. The anger, the shouting, the months of tension, everything reached a breaking point in that moment. And what happened next would turn a heated argument into something far more dangerous. Before we continue, if you've made it this far into the story, comment below and tell me what you think is really happening inside this marriage. And don't forget to subscribe to Untold Mystery Stories, because the final moments of this case would leave an entire Texas community horrified. Because within minutes, the situation inside the Harper home would spiral into violence. Rachel yanked the front door open, but Michael's voice stopped her. Rachel, wait. She froze in the doorway, her back still turned to him. What now? She snapped. Michael's voice was calmer this time. Just don't leave like this. Rachel slowly turned around. Like what? Like we're enemies. Rachel laughed coldly. Maybe we are. Michael shook his head. No, we're just angry. Rachel stepped back inside and slammed the door shut behind her. The sound echoed through the house. Michael watched her carefully. Rachel, listen to yourself. Rachel pointed at him again. No, you listen. Her voice trembled with rage. You act like you're perfect. Michael frowned. I never said that. Rachel paced across the living room. You sit there judging everything I do. Michael's patience was fading. I'm not judging you. Rachel stopped pacing and stared straight at him. Yes, you are. Michael took a breath. I'm worried about you. Rachel's eyes widened with disbelief. Worried about me? Michael nodded. You're not the same person you used to be. Rachel's voice dropped. And whose fault is that? Michael blinked. What? Rachel stepped closer. You think I just woke up one day angry? Michael didn't answer. Rachel continued. You think the pressure just magically appeared? Michael spoke quietly. I know your job is stressful. Rachel shook her head. No, you don't. Her voice cracked slightly. You have no idea what it feels like to carry everything. Michael softened his tone. Then let me help you carry it. Rachel stared at him for several seconds, and for a brief moment, the anger in her eyes faded. But then something shifted again. Her expression hardened. You can't help me. Michael frowned. Why not? Rachel said something that shocked him. Because you're part of the problem. Michael stared at her. How am I the problem? Rachel's voice grew louder again. You question everything I do. Michael stepped forward. Because I'm worried, Rachel shouted back. No, because you don't trust me. Michael's voice rose with frustration. That's not true. Rachel suddenly grabbed a glass from the table and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall. Michael froze. The crash was so loud, it seemed to shake the entire house. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Michael stared at the broken glass on the floor. Then, he slowly looked back at Rachel. Rachel, what are you doing? Her breathing was fast. Her hands trembled. Michael spoke carefully. This is getting out of control. Rachel didn't respond. Michael stepped closer. We need to stop. Rachel suddenly shoved a chair out of her way. The legs screeched across the floor. Michael raised his voice. Rachel! But she was no longer listening. Months of anger and pressure had finally erupted. Michael stepped toward her. Rachel, look at me. Rachel's eyes were filled with fury. You think you can control everything? Michael shook his head. I'm trying to calm things down. Rachel shouted. I don't need you to control me. Michael reached forward again. Just stop for a second. Rachel suddenly pushed him, hard. Michael stumbled backward into the coffee table. The impact knocked the air out of him. For a moment, he simply stared at her in disbelief. Rachel, you just pushed me. Rachel didn't apologize. Instead, she stood there, breathing heavily. Michael slowly stood up. This has gone too far. Rachel's voice trembled. No, it hasn't. Michael raised his hands again. Rachel, I'm not fighting you, Rachel shouted back. You already are. Michael tried to stay calm. No, I'm not. Rachel suddenly lunged toward him again. Michael instinctively stepped aside. Rachel, stop! But she shoved him again. This time, Michael grabbed her wrists. Enough! Rachel struggled against him. Let go of me! Michael held her arms just long enough to stop the attack. Rachel, listen to yourself. Rachel twisted violently and broke free. Then she shouted something that made Michael's heart sink. I hate you. The words echoed through the living room. Michael stood there stunned. For years they had survived deployments, stress, distance. But hearing those words now felt like something inside him had shattered. Rachel. But Rachel was already moving again. She grabbed another object from the table and threw it. The room descended into chaos, furniture knocked over, glass breaking, voices shouting. Outside, a neighbor walking his dog slowed down. He looked toward the Harper house. Something sounded wrong, very wrong. Inside the house, Michael backed away. Rachel, stop! Rachel screamed back. Don't tell me what to do! Michael looked at her and realized something terrifying. She wasn't thinking clearly anymore. The anger had completely taken over. Michael took another step back. Rachel, please. Rachel suddenly grabbed something else from the counter. Michael's eyes widened. Rachel, put that down. But she didn't. The room felt like it was spinning out of control. And the next few seconds would change everything. Outside, the neighbor had already pulled out his phone. Inside the Harper home, the violent argument between a Navy chief petty officer and her Marine veteran husband had reached its most dangerous moment. Before we reveal what happened next, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Untold Mystery Stories. Because the final moments of this case would leave an entire Texas community stunned. And what happened next inside that living room would shatter this military family forever.